talking about all things CRP to enrolling your land into it. CRP can be a little overwhelming at first when you see all the different practices and things that might come up along the way of getting your land enrolled. So hopefully tonight we answer a little bit of those questions or make you feel a little bit more at ease for when you walk into the FSA office to ask questions and get your land enrolled in CRP. What we're going to cover is FSA, Farm Service Agencies, and important information, the things that come up front, general CRP, continuous CRP, your contract management, and what is next steps. A little bit of background on CRP or Conservation Reserve Programs. It's been around since 1985. It helps the soil, water, and the wildlife. It saved 8 billion tons of soil and provides a stable income for farmers and provides hunting and recreational opportunities for your land, as well as helps the rural economy. We asked a local farmer and he stated, with CRP, in the Farm Bill, we are saving 1,730 metric tons of CO2 per year. That's equivalent to driving 2.5 million miles per year. And the CRP and cover crops also attract deer and pheasant as well as other wildlife. There's payment rates that are based off of your top 3 soil types, not the type of CRP you choose. We can tell you your estimated payment rate when you come into the office and discuss your further steps. Eligibility for CRP. So CRP, to be eligible, you must have a cropping history in this Farm Bill that's reported to the FSA 4 out of the 6 years from 2012 to 2017. And that must be a rotational or grain crop, such as soybean or corn. Marginal pasture land is eligible for some select practices, riparian buffers, and filter strips. Producers must have owned the land for at least 12 months prior. So if you are a new farm owner or a land manager that has not owned the property for a year, once you hit that year mark, you are then eligible to put your land into CRP. FSA provides participants with an annual rental rate as well as a cost share and incentive payments to help you get your land into that CRP. The Farm Bill. Now, the Farm Bill is subject to change. It was up in 2023, but now has been extended with a few other little things, but it has been extended for now. And so the Farm Bill with the FSA is voluntary conservation-related programs. These programs are work to address a large number of farming and ranching-related conservation issues: drinking water, soil erosion, wildlife habitat, prevention and restoration of forests and wetlands, and as well as aiding farmers whose farms have been damaged by natural disasters. Why CRP? Well, the Conservation Reserve Program pays you that rental rate that we had discussed in exchange for farmers removing environmentally sensitive land and out of agricultural production and planting species that will improve the overall environmental quality. Start thinking about these opportunities. Most of you are on here today already probably know parts of your farm or your land that you have an idea of where your CRP you want to go, or recreational and hunting opportunities that you want to enhance for yourself in those areas, or just an overall idea of what your farm looks like out there for your CRP. On average, 20% of the farms lose money. 20% of the farm breaks even. 60% of the farm turns that total profit. So adding that CRP, if it could help just a little bit of that total profit for you and your land, is worth looking into to see if that is a feasible reason for you to want to be putting it into CRP. Right here, what you're looking at is cropping history data, and it shows you your lower yielding areas and your higher yielding areas of your farm. A lot of you probably know where those areas are on your farm, and that's why you're interested in maybe exploring your CRP options for that. So also on here, we have now a person, Dallas Glazik, who is one of our longest tenured Illinois PFQF employees, and his job is solely related to the precision agriculture of taking your cropping history and your data reports and finding your areas that you could improve on in your farm to hopefully overall make your farm more profitable. Like I was stating in that last slide, you can see here where some of the areas are really low yields and not really producing the way that you want them. You probably all have those areas, or if you don't, that's good, but you might have those areas on your farm. So taking them out of production and saving that hassle, that time, and those expenses of putting it in for a low yielding area and putting it into CRP can overall make your farm or your land more profitable for you, as well as add aesthetic or recreational purposes. What are your farm goals? A lot of people have different goals throughout it, whether it's the money, the conservation, recreation, or the legacy. I am big on pushing leaving the land better than when we found it. So adding CRP onto your land or your property might just leave that long-standing wildlife habitat that future generations can enjoy from now. Also, things to think about: what you already have on your property or your land, if you want simple or diverse mixes, if you have low wet spots that you might want to turn into a wetland, small areas that you want beautiful forbs and grasses to put into a pollinator, or what you want to do with your land in general. I will now pass it over to Emily Hale, and she will talk about general sign up for you.
Hi, so yeah, my name is Emily. I'm going to spend the next few minutes talking about general CRP. So general CRP is a competitive bid process where land is offered on a nationwide basis, and the USDA selects offers based on a ranking system called the Environmental Benefits Index, or the EBI. So the contracts, depending on what practice you choose to enroll in, can last between 10 and 15 years, at the end of which you would have the chance to re-enroll in. There are no incentive payments for general CRP, but there is a 50% cost share provided. Because we're in between farm bills right now, we don't have a sign-up date for general CRP at this time. So we're working off of a batching system for continuous CRP, which Ben is going to talk about later on, but we're waiting until after the first batching period of continuous CRP before the sign-up date for general CRP is announced. I've heard not to expect the sign-up date to be announced until closer to April 1st. So EBI is the ranking tool. EBI stands for, again, Environmental Benefits Index. It's the ranking tool used to decide who can be entered into general CRP, since there is a limited amount of acres and tracts that can be accepted based on the funding. FSA assigns each offer a score based on the offer's relative environmental factors, such as soil or vegetative cover. Each EBI ranking is unique to each track, and each offer competes with all other offers. And this basically is in place to ensure that the most environmentally sensitive acres are selected relative to cost, and that all offers are considered fairly. But it's important to note that we don't know what score it takes to be accepted, and we don't know when accepted applications are going to be announced or who will be accepted, again, because it's on a a competitive bid process. So there are 6 EBI factors that make up your EBI score. And you actually have the power to influence some of them. So the ones that you can influence are N1, which is the wildlife factor, N4, which is the enduring benefits factor, N5, which is the air quality benefits, and N6, which is your cost. And all of the factors N1 through 6 are all added up together to make your total offer points for your tract. So N1 is the wildlife factor. So the next three factors that you can influence are all based off your wildlife factor. So this is it's an evaluation of the expected wildlife benefits. So within this section, you have the chance to add between 10 and 100 points between three different subcategories. And the subcategories are wildlife habitat cover, wildlife enhancement, and wildlife priority zones. Wildlife priority zones, you don't have the ability to readily change or influence. Points are provided if your property ends up laying in some of the areas in blue on the map on the right. So there are several different programs that you can sign up for within this category. These can be existing environments or vegetative cover, or you can go in and plant this cover to gain these points. But it's important to remember that if the habitat you have or create doesn't meet the criteria for the program that you signed up for, you'll be required to upgrade the plot to the standard that's been set for that criteria. There will also be status reviews completed at various times throughout the length of your contract to make sure that you're maintaining the standard for the program that your contract is in. And this slide and the next slide are going to be a couple examples of some of those programs. More diverse plantings are typically going to get you more points to go towards your EBI ranking. So a CP1 are introduced grasses and legumes. That's going to give you 10 or 40 points. Native grasses are going to get you more points at 20 or 50. Tree plantings are going to get you 10, 20, 30, or 50 points. And then CP4Ds, which are permanent wildlife habitats, are going to get you 40 or 50 points. And then pollinator habitats, which are really popular with landowners, can get you as much as 50 points. So for wildlife enhancement, there are three options available. So you can add in a pollinator habitat, a food plot, or you can choose to do no enhancement and get 0 points. All options are available to you. There's a maximum of 20 points possible. So the first one that you can think about is the pollinator habitat. You can put the entire field into a pollinator habitat and get 50 points, or you can put a portion of it into a pollinator and be awarded with 20 points. This area has to be greater than 10% of the field for it to qualify. Keep in mind that if the participant chooses a CP42, which is the pollinator program, and N1A, then you would automatically get the 20 points needed that would be rewarded for this section in N1B. Pollinators are also available in continuous CRP as long as the area is less than 10% of the farm, or less than 10 acres, whichever is smaller. You can also put a portion into a wildlife food plot, which can add 5 points to the offer, but the landowner has to reestablish the habitat each year of the contract, and there's no cost share available for a food plot establishment each year. Food plots are limited to 10% of each field, or 5 acres, whichever is smaller. So the enduring benefits are just about how likely the cover selected for N1 is going to remain on the landscape after the end of the CRP contract. You can get anywhere between 0 and 50 points for this category. You're going to get the most points for trees since they're not easily outcompeted when they're mature. You're going to get less points for a pollinator and no points for any other type of program. So N5D, so the N5 factor evaluates air quality improvements from reducing airborne dust. This provides a relative index of the projected carbon sequestration benefits of CRP cover types over the expected life of the practice. So all points assigned are practice-based. By choosing a practice that's primarily trees, you can gain up to 10 points to your EBI score, while a CP12, which is a food plot, would get you 0 points. Again, generally less diverse mixes, such as food plots, don't really affect your points very much. So the last factor a landowner can influence is the cost. So there's N6A and N6B, or yeah, N6B. So N6A is the cost, which is determined after the end of sign up. If a landowner offers a lower rate per acre for the rental payment, then there could be an increased chance of being accepted. So, and an N6B is the payment offer. This is when a landowner can offer a payment rate that is below the maximum payment rate offer. So, for example, a landowner would receive $100 an acre for a CRP based on their soils, but if they offer the land at a payment 1 to 15% lower than that, up to a 15% reduction would get you 25 points to put back into your EBI score. But this should really be the last resort to increase your points. If you go through all the other options available, you should have a good chance of getting into the program. So I have some examples of what some of these practices might look like if you implemented them on your property. So this is a CP1, which is introduced grasses and legumes. Something like this planted in brome could get you 10 points in the N1 category for wildlife habitat cover. This is a brome stand, like I said, but it could also be planted to something like fescue or bluegrass. So this is an example of something with a lot more diversity. So this could be a CP2 or CP42, which would be a native grass planting or a pollinator. So something like this with a lot of native plants and plant diversity could get you up to 50 points. A CP2 practice would include native grasses and legumes, which could get you 20 to 50 points. And this is what a food plot might look like. This is an example of a CP12. This would get you 5 points to go towards your EBI score when added as an enhancement. Remember that food plots do have to be replanted each year, and there's no cost share available for that. So for a recap of general CRP, it's great for whole fields or portions of fields. More diverse seed mixes for enhancements or the original wildlife cover will benefit you. It will get you more points to go through your for your EBI. And think about what your goals are, not just your goals right now, but your long-term goals for at least the duration of the CRP contract. Keep in mind the management that will be required to upkeep any CRP practices in relation to others. So I'm going to go ahead and hand this over to Ben to talk about continuous CRP.
Sorry about that. All right, so I'm going to go over continuous CRP programs and sign up. Continuous CRP, for the most part, is very similar to general CRP. The two main differences is since the name, continuous CRP sign up doesn't have a set time of year where you have to sign up date, and there's no competition for points to get into continuous CRP. It's available for a broad number of concerns such as soil, water, or even wildlife resource issues that you spot on your farm. And unlike general CRP, it also offers incentive payments. And just like general, the contracts are 10 to 15 years. And once your contract is up, you can re-enroll the land. So what's nice about continuous is if you spot resource concerns starting to become a problem on your land, you can look into your CRP options, get it into continuous, and address that concern before it becomes an even bigger issue, and hopefully mitigate it. And there's a lot of different practices that you can do in your continuous CRP. This is a whole list of them, and I'm going to go through all of them over the course of this presentation. There's CP9, shallow water areas for wildlife, CP21, which are filter strips. Those are very common. CP23 and CP23A are both wetland restorations. The difference between those is whether or not you're in the floodplain. CP33 is a habitat buffer for upland birds. CP42 is the same as what Emily had just gone over, where it's a good diverse pollinator habitat. CP43 is the same as CP42, except it's in a strip. And then CP38 are pheasants or quail safe practices, which I'll go over later as well. So the first one is a CP9, shallow water area for wildlife. So these are maximum 10 acres in size. So like 2023, for example, would be a good year to talk about it. We had a really wet spring in my area. We had like a big old storm come through. It rained really hard. And then farmers who had planted, they had a big section of their field just sitting with water, and the crops there died. So they had to go in and replant them afterwards. If you got a spot in your field that's causing you that problem, like a lot, this might be a good plan to look into. This practice has two main components to it, where you'll have the standing water area that holds about 6 to 18 inches of water on average. And then there's a 20 to 120 foot wide average buffer around that standing water area. And these do require engineered dirt work to be installed. So I have to go through and make sure that it will hold water instead of the water just kind of pooling and then slowly eroding away. The next practice is the CP21 filter strip. These are very common, where if you've got like a section of your field that after rains, it starts washing out, or you've got like a gully forming that's going all the way across your field. Instead of it getting worse, you can take that out of production and put it into this practice. This practice is good benefits all around because it stops your field from kind of washing away and becoming a hazard, such as in the picture on the right. And it helps remove nutrients, sediment, organic matter, pesticides, and other pollutants coming off the surface before it makes it into the water table. So these are typically comprised of stiff-stemmed plants, or plants that are able to withstand the flow of water, slow it down a little bit, filter out those nutrients, get the water slowed down enough to drop some of the particulate that it's carrying, help absorb some of the nutrients from the fertilizer that's coming off the field, all sorts of things. Here's a good picture of a spot that would be ideal for putting it into a CP21. You can see that this farmer has got this section of field that he can't really do anything with. It's wet, can't farm it, equipment's going to get sunk in there. So you can take that, put a 20-foot buffer around it where you don't have to worry about it, and it'll help catch some of the runoff coming off of your field. And here's a good aerial view of what it might look like for your field if you've got this. And then here's that same map with the filter strip installed. So you can see there's that erosion going on, and then you put the filter strip on either side. It helps control that. And then here's a picture of a filter strip. And you can see in the background, the filter strip, just like that previous map image, is running parallel to that gully or waterway that's going along the field there, and catching all of the stuff that's coming off of the field down into that. The next practice I want to talk about is a CP23A. It's a wetland restoration. It's very similar to a CP9. The CP23A is specific for the non-floodplain. To qualify for CP23A, you need to have at least 50% of your soils be hydric. And if you don't know your soil types, that's fine. Go into your local FSA office and they can help you out with that. Because they also need to do that to determine what your rental rate is going to be for your CRP program. And this, again, similar to the CP9, has a component of the water and a habitat buffer. And so for CP23A, the habitat buffer is a 4-to-1 ratio of habitat to the wetland. Unlike the CP9, this does not require earthwork. And you can also put in food plots and tree shrub plantings into these. So if you're an avid hunter, these make really great hunting habitats. That's another reason I like to push them. So this here would be an aerial photo of what would be a good CP23A practice. You can see that there's plenty of water being held there. And around the water, you can see there's that habitat buffer that's put in. And here's a map showing that this farmer has a section of his field that's holding a lot of water, kind of going to refer back to what I was talking about, where this 23 spring, we had it really wet before we had that drought hit. And this farmer's got a section of his field that's just holding on to that water. So instead of trying to deal with that, he's got awkward angles in his field. His rows aren't going to be quite straight. What he can do is he can put that into a CP23A practice, and he can even square off his field to make it easier to farm. And so now he's got his water component and the buffer habitat tied in there. So the next one is a CP23. It's very similar to a CP23A. The two main differences are the ratio of habitat to wetland, in that the CP23 requires you to be within the 100-year floodplain. And again, if you don't know if you're within the 100-year floodplain, please stop into your office and they'll be able to help you with that. And just like the CP23A, you are allowed to put in food plots and trees into these practices. And here's another photo of what I'm talking about, where you can have your standing water component and it's got the habitat buffer surrounding it. And here's an aerial view similar to that map earlier, where you can see this farmer has a large section of his field that's got water issues. And so instead of trying to farm into these awkward corners and angles that he's got in there, that's going to be hard on his equipment, he can just take that whole section of the field out of production. And now he's got a nice square field, and he doesn't have to worry about any of the issues of that wet area down there. So the next one I want to talk about would be CP33, the habitat buffers for upland birds. This typically is 30 to 120 foot average width along one or all sides of a field. This practice has to border cropland, and it can include pivot corners. So this is kind of the opposite end of the spectrum as the CP9s and the 23s. So like later in the summer of 2023, where it got really dry, if you're a farmer that relies on center pivot irrigation, it's not going to reach the corner of your field. So instead of you wasting money on trying to grow crops in a section of your field that's just not getting irrigated and the crops aren't going to come in really well, you can take that section that's not being reached by your irrigation system and put that into a practice like a CP33. And again, you're going to cut your losses by doing that and provide great habitat for wildlife. So if you're an outdoorsman or a hunter, or you just like seeing wildlife, this is a great practice. Another qualification for this is your field needs to be at least 5 acres in size. The seed cost ranges from $80 to $150, but like Emily was saying, there's cost share incentive for these, and there's also practice incentive payments, as I said earlier, for continuous CRP. So those costs can be offset pretty well. So here's a picture example of what I was talking about with the pivot corners, where you can see the crops are growing really well where the irrigation can reach it, but just outside of that, and in that corner especially, it's going to be too hard to get in there and irrigate that and grow good high quality crops and get good yields out of that. So instead of dealing with it and fighting with it and throwing money at the problem, the farmer put it into habitat and is getting his yearly payments off of that, or she or they are doing it, and they don't have to worry about it anymore. So there was a study done by Mississippi State University back in 2006 to 2008 through a whole series of states, and they were looking at the populations of bobwhite quails. They found that farmers that had CP33 practices on their fields had significantly higher quail populations on those fields than farmers that didn't have CP33 habitat practices on them. So as I was saying, if you're somebody who likes wildlife, likes having wildlife around, likes hunting, these are great practices to have because they benefit you and they benefit the wildlife. And another thing that I want to talk about is these practices are also beneficial to the environment as well. So like you can have these pivot corners CP33 put in, and it's going to behave similar to a filter strip where if you've got runoff coming through the field, it's still going to catch some of that. So you can still get a lot of benefits from CP33s that you might get from CP21s and stuff. In another study that was done by Iowa State University, IDNR, Midwest Association of Fish and Wildlife Agencies, and Pheasants Forever, found similar results with pheasant populations, that areas that had a mix of cropland and grassland cover had a higher population of pheasants than areas that did not have that cover. The next practice I want to talk about, Emily already talked about, is a CP42 pollinator habitat. Now for continuous, you need to have a half-acre minimum for this practice, and the maximum is 10 acres or 10% of the cropland, whichever is lower. So if you have a 70-acre field, you can only enroll 7 acres of it into a pollinator. The approximate seed cost for this is $135 to $165 per acre. But as I was saying before, you get cost shares and practice incentive payments for this, so it does help offset that cost. And one thing I want to touch on is pollinator is a really high quality habitat because it's very diverse and it provides a lot of habitat for a wide variety of wildlife: deer, turkey, pheasants, quail, songbirds, box turtles. Everything benefits from these pollinator habitats because there's so much diversity. CP43, like I said earlier, is essentially the same as a CP42, except its application is a little bit different. So these are typically just strips that are 30 to 120 foot wide, or rows, like a row of your field or along the edge. It can't exceed 25% of your cropland area, but they can be placed around the perimeter of the field, through the field, or parallel or perpendicular to a waterway. Essentially, it's the same concept as a CP42. It's just the way that you're applying it to your field. This is a good picture of a CP43. Iowa State University published a study looking into these practices, and they found that just by putting 10% of your farm into a prairie strip practice, reduced soil loss by 95%, nitrates by 72%, and phosphorus by 77%. A 10% reduction in field size that gets placed into a CP43 led to a 5 to 30% yield increase in soybeans, and a 40% increase was achieved when it was interseeded with buckwheat. Here's another photo of some prairie strips that are here in central Illinois. The photo on the left is a really good photo. So this farmer here, as you can see on the photo, the field slopes downhill from left to right. And whenever it would rain, the water would just go rushing through that field. There'd just be so much runoff coming through that would go through there, and he started getting a washout. So what he did is he put in these prairie strips, a series of them down his field, and this is a picture of the first one that's there. And this one caught 8 inches of soil after one rain, and you can see all the debris there from that field that's uphill of it, all that crop debris that's left there, and how deep it buried the plants there on how much it's catching. And he's got a series of these through that field. So he's getting a lot of soil back into his field that he's catching off of his neighbors. It's really important. And then this also showed a 5 to 20% yield increase in their soybeans. The next concept I want to talk about is precision agriculture. So we have a precision ag specialist. His name is Dallas Galazic. So what he does is he helps you go into using continuous CRP on your farm, and it helps you increase your profit and your bottom line. So if you have problem areas like wet areas or awkward areas near tree lines, or soils that are bad for farming, or just awkward spots that's hard to get equipment into and out of, it'd be worth reaching out to him and seeing what options are available to you. So kind of similar to what Zach was going over earlier. So this is a picture of like a heat map for yield data for this crop. And if you see here, along the southern edge of this field where the tree line is, and even the east side there a little bit, where the crops are shaded, he's not getting a lot of yield out of that. He's actually losing money on those crops because he's putting more in than he's getting out, or she. So what they did is they went and put a CP33 field border in, and they took all that area out that was having the poor yield, and it led to a 10.6% return of investments off of just a 10.1 acre change. And if you look, you can see the profit went up almost $20 an acre. And here's another heat map showing the similar thing. So you can see the right-hand side of this field and the bottom right had pretty poor yields or even losses coming off of that from investment. So by taking this out and putting it into a CP23A practice, they had a 4.6% return of investment with a 30-acre change. And so kind of similar to what I was talking about with before, where it's like you have areas of your field that's hard to access, or like you have overlapping rows. It's just less productive to get in there, because say you have a 52-row planter and it's only 40 rows wide, it's kind of a pain to get in there. So you can take that out of production and put it into CRP. So this is a good aerial photo of a field that has those issues. You can see there's a lot of fingers and odd areas that just don't line up well. It takes forever going in and out of there. So what this farmer did is they took them out of production, as you can see here, and all these areas are dedicated to CRP. In the field, even though the field is still not square, it's much more straightened out and saves a lot of time. Helps reduce fuel consumption, lowers wear and tear on equipment. You spend less time in the field, and you have to make fewer turns trying to get stuff turned around. Here's another example of a field that's got some awkward corners on it on the top and a little bit on the bottom that's not squared up. So this farmer went and put this into a CRP practice and squared it up. And here I'm going to go ahead and pass this over to my colleague Zach, and he's going to go over safe practices.
Thanks, Ben. So safe practice is the state acres for wildlife enhancement. This is hugely beneficial and one of the best conservation things that has came out in a while. These practices are designated to enhance important wildlife populations by creating critical habitat and food sources for different wildlife. Both safe can be both in continuous or general sign up. You'll just have to go talk to your local FSA office to see what practices are available in your area. With safe, it's a minimum of 10 acres. And if you're enrolling a couple different fields with that, then they must be contiguous acres, as in touching acres for it. You can see on the right in that picture that there is a designated safe pheasant zone and a safe quail initiative zone. And basically the only real thing that is the difference is that the native short grasses are only allowed in the quail safe zone. So you wouldn't allow the Indian grass, big blue, or switchgrass in there. So that's another thing with the safe. Safe is financial benefits. It's in that 10 to 15 years, like they had stated, with payments are up to a 50% cost share. And then as well as practices enrolled in the CRP continuous sign up will also receive a 5% practice initiative as well as sign up initiatives. Unfortunately, wind turbines are not in those. So if you do happen to see those, they're becoming more popular and popping up a lot. They are not within the safe. State acres for wildlife enhancement is a lot of the same practices that they stated before. But like I said, they have to be 10 contiguous acres. So there's the native buffers, the 33s and the 43s, like Ben was stating. Wetlands, the CP9s and CP23As. The CP9s may only be used in the pheasant safe area. So that's one thing that's different than the quail initiative area. Whole field practices of natives are CP2, CP4D, and CP25. So if you'd see ever a CP38E CP4D or -4D or 2, those are the same practices. It's just through the safe. Food plots may only be used in conjunction with the CP2 and 4Ds. CP4Ds are super cool because you can kind of customize them to the way that you want it by allowing the food plots on there, and it has a hardwood component to it too. So you can use plums or different shrubs or hardwoods with the grass practice, as well as maybe a food plot to kind of cater it. So talk to your Farm Bill biologist if you're interested in that and you're able to do that, because it'll be a really cool project that you can kind of customize it to the way that you're wanting your land set up or your property to be set up. Through these CRP contracts, you have to have management on these practices. Most of them are required to have a management practice through your conservation plan that you'll receive after you get through the enrollment process, and then you're going into the stages of getting your CRP ready to be planted or put into the ground. They're completed in years 4 to 6 out of your 10-year contract. So what you find is you plant the first year, you'll see stuff the first couple years, but after year 3, you really see what's established in those practices to see how well your seeding came through and what is starting to come up and what areas are, might need an interseeding for mid-contract management or what you're kind of looking at. Typically in a 3-year rotation, so that way if you're over 25 acres, you'll have to burn if you choose to do prescribed burns in over 3-year period or different places. Basically just trying to leave some habitat there so that you're working in sections of it and it's a little bit more manageable to chip away over a 3-year period rather than just going in and trying to manage it all at once and tackle on a huge thing that might seem overwhelming at first. There is no cost share with mid-contract management, unfortunately, so that will be on that, but there is different management practices that you can do for that contract. Like I was saying, with that contract management and those activities that you have to do or that are required, some of the common ones are prescribed fire, interseeding, strip disking, spraying, or prescribed grazing. Prescribed fire is huge and very beneficial to your CRP management practices. Getting fire on the ground to be able to drop the seeds and be able to interseed after that if you so choose to. If you find areas that are needing to be a little bit more of a flush stand of grasses or forbs, but those are all practices that you are allowed to do under there. In your conservation plan, it'll map out what you're going to want to do. Now you can, customize that a little bit if you're wanting to end up doing a fire and you need to interseed as well. That's things that you can go through with your conservation plan as it's being made. Should I go with continuous or general? Hopefully Emily and Ben and I have done a good job of explaining what you're kind of looking for. Some of the key points to go back over. Continuous is if it has hydric soil, buffers, filter strips, whole fields over 10 acres, small pollinator plots. In general is located in the conservation priority area, no hydric soil, whole fields under 10 acres, highly erodible. You need to weigh your options, see what's best for you and your property or what is available for you and your land. We can help you. So like I said, contact your local PFQF biologist. We are here to help. We're a tool to be used. We're happy to help, and we love talking about this as well as seeing it put through. So if you're new to CRP, what you'll want to do is you'll bring your deed and a map with you when you visit the USDA FSA office. They'll have the rest of the stuff kind of generally laid out for you, and hopefully that this is a little bit more information that you can take to them so that way you can go in there having an idea of what might be viable for you and your property. Again, we are here to help and we're happy to help. Sign up dates, as Emily stated for general, they have not announced that yet, so be on the lookout for that. Like she said, it might come at a certain time. We're not really 100% sure, so just be on the lookout for that. Continuous, with the Farm Bill being kind of can kick down the road a little bit in extension, the first sign up period for this batching is January 12th through the 15th of March. Once all the acres of this current farm bill are used up, there won't be any more. So if you're thinking about it and you're eager to get it into it, sign up as soon as you can, or go in and talk to your FSA agent agency office as soon as you can. We'd like to thank our partners too. We're all in this together, conservation as a whole, to try to fight the good fight of putting habitat back onto the ground. The FSA, USDA, US Department of Agriculture, Natural Resource Conservation Service, your local soil and water districts, Illinois Department of Natural Resources, and for some information, you'll want to talk to your U.S. Fish and Wildlife for safe. They'll know what is endangered in your area or critical to have that habitat for them. If you have any questions after this, we are going to leave a little bit of time to be able to talk. This is some barcodes that you can scan to try to see where your local Farm Bill biologists are, as well as the next slide will have the names of the biologists, so you kind of have an idea of who you're talking to and what area they cover. So if you or your farm or the land that you're wanting to put into CRP falls in any of those areas, you'll be able to see on the next slide who's in that area, and definitely reach out to them. This is the list of all the Farm Bill biologists as well as all of the Illinois team. We have a great team, and all of us take pride in what we do, and all of the other Farm Bill biologists not in here tonight are very knowledgeable and experienced, and they'll be happy to help you with anything you guys might need. So if, like I said, see the name so you'll be familiar with it, definitely reach out to them.
Sorry, my mic was muted there. As Zach had mentioned, we're going to go ahead and turn things over for questions. So please feel free to insert any questions that you had come up, anything that you would like clarified. Please go ahead and put that in the questions and answers or in the chat, and we will have our Farm Bill biologists answer those for you. Okay, it looks like we did have a question about CP25 specifically. I guess if you could elaborate maybe a little bit more on what exactly you would like covered for CP25, or if you would just like that to kind of be briefed over again.
CP25 is a rare and declining habitat. Touching on that, it's in the general sign up. It's rehabilitation of endangered habitats. It provides wildlife nesting cover and escape cover, as well as food. It does reduce soil erosion too, as well, so that way you'll have a little bit of that component in there, as well as it supplies nutrients for the pollinators. As far as the pollinator goes, it would help supply nutrients for that pollinator. 42 has all those grasses and forbs in it, so CP25 does, but it will also help and benefit your CP42.
All right, everybody. Thank you again so much for attending tonight. We hope that this presentation helped answer some questions for you and was beneficial for you. We encourage you to reach out to your nearest Farm Bill biologist with any other questions you may have. You can find their contact information on our state website at www.ihuntil.com. Keep your eye out for the link to this recording, as well as we will send this to all the registrants for the webinar tonight. So thank you again and have a great rest of your evening.